For a long time, the shock wasn't loud, it was quiet, the kind that settles in your chest when you realise you've been misunderstood so consistently that people stopped asking questions and started handing you labels like they were facts. And somewhere in that long stretch of misreading you, you learned a rare kind of healing without closure. Healing without the satisfying moment where everyone finally admits what happened healing while the room still thinks it knows the story. You learn to keep moving without explanations, to let your growth speak in a language arguments can't translate, and you learn to stop begging people to get it, because you finally understood that some minds don't misunderstand by accident, they misunderstand by preference, since confusion keeps them comfortable and clarity holds them accountable. And that's where the hook comes in, because if you felt a strange calm lately, like your spirit is done negotiating, it may be because God is shifting something in the unseen, and an apology is coming, not because you chased it, not because you demanded it, not because you performed pain until they felt sorry, but because the pressure of truth is rising and it's reaching the surface. Make no mistake, this apology isn't your validation, it's your confirmation. It's not the oxygen to your worth, it's the receipt that heaven saw what humans tried to bury, and it's evidence that you can be silent and still be vindicated by God's timing. So if you've been wondering whether your restraint mattered, whether your quiet endurance counted, whether your choice to walk away instead of fighting back was weakness or wisdom, stay here, because this message is for the chosen ones who stopped explaining themselves and started aligning the ones who healed without applause. And if this hits that tender spot in you, don't just listen. Like a spectator, claim it. Like a participant, like the video, subscribe for what's next and comment one word, confirmed, so your own voice becomes a marker that you're stepping into a new season where truth doesn't need you to chase it, it finds its way to the light. And from that place, it makes sense why you stopped expecting an apology, because chosen ones eventually reach a point where they release the need to be understood, not because they became cold, but because they became wise with their energy. You didn't stop caring, you stopped leaking. You stopped pouring explanations into cups that were never meant to hold truth. You stopped rehearsing your intentions for people who are committed to interpreting you through their own insecurity. You realized that the need to be understood can become a hidden chain because it keeps you circling the same conversations, pleading for fairness from people who benefit from being unfair, waiting for empathy, from people who avoid accountability like it's fire. And at some point you surrendered that craving, not in bitterness, but in clarity. You accepted that some people would rather label you than face what they did, because labels are convenient, they simplify the story. They keep them from having to look in the mirror. You're too sensitive. Sounds easier than I was. Careless. Your dramatic sounds easier than I was wrong. You changed sounds easier than you finally stopped tolerating what hurt you. And once you saw that you stopped trying to edit yourself into something they could digest, you stopped standing in court every day presenting evidence to a jury that already decided the verdict. You began to live like someone who knows God is the final witness and that surrender is what made you spiritually untouchable. Because when you release the demand for human validation, you become hard to manipulate. People can't bait you with misunderstandings if you don't need them to understand. They can't control you with silence if you don't depend on their approval to breathe. They can't keep you trapped in emotional negotiations if you've already made peace with being misread. And that's why your life started shifting, because when you stopped expecting an apology, you didn't lose, you graduated. You moved from needing them to admit it to trusting God to handle it. You moved from begging for acknowledgement to building a future. You moved from explaining your heart to protecting it. And heaven pays attention to that kind of maturity, because it's not just emotional growth, it's spiritual authority. The authority to say, even if you never apologize, I will still obey. I will still heal, I will still rise. And that posture is exactly what triggers the next part, the unseen pressure building on their conscience. Because conviction works like a slow thunderstorm, it doesn't always announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it rolls in quietly at first like a subtle heaviness. They can't name a discomfort, they keep trying to outrun a mental noise that appears when the room gets silent. People can suppress truth for a season, yes. They can drown it with distractions, bury it under new relationships, cover it with laughter, hide it behind success. But truth has a way of following them into quiet moments where no audience can protect them. It follows them into late nights when their phone goes dark and their thoughts turn loud. It follows them into the pauses between conversations when they can't hide behind performance. Their sleep gets lighter, not necessarily because they're afraid of you, but because they're being confronted by what they avoided. Their excuses stop tasting sweet like sugar that suddenly turns chalky in the mouth. The story they told themselves begins to crack, not all at once, but in hairline fractures, because when God starts applying pressure to conscience, the mind can't hold a lie comfortably anymore. They replay moments they used to dismiss. They remember your face when you were quiet. They remember what you said that they laughed off. They remember the way you left without drama, and that calm departure becomes louder than any argument you could have had, because it forces a question they don't want to answer. What if I was wrong? And that question is the beginning of conviction, because conviction isn't mainly shame. It's truth pressing against the soul until the soul can no longer pretend it doesn't feel it. They start noticing patterns in themselves they used to blame on you. They start feeling the weight of their own words, how they twisted a narrative, how they participated in silence, how they benefited from your misunderstanding. And here's the key you need to hold with clean hands. This isn't you winning, it's truth surfacing. This isn't your ego being fed, it's God restoring order. You're not sitting somewhere plotting their downfall. You're simply living, and the light in your obedience is exposing what was hidden. Conviction can make people restless, not because you cursed them, but because truth has entered the room. They may find themselves feeling uneasy in places they used to enjoy, because the same comfort they once had is now interrupted by a whisper that says, you know what you did. They might talk about you randomly, not even to attack, but because you've become a mirror they can't stop seeing. They might feel an urge to reach out, then resist it, then feel the urge again, because the spirit doesn't like unfinished truth. And while you keep your heart guarded, you also keep it humble. Because the point isn't to celebrate someone else's conviction. The point is to recognize that God is able to make truth rise without you having to fight for it. And as that pressure builds, it leads straight into section 3. The apology you never asked for is a divine reversal, because when the unseen shifts, the visible eventually follows, and what looks like a message is often a reset in spiritual order. This apology is not petty drama, it's a reversal of narratives. The one who painted you as the problem now feels the weight of their own actions. The one who stayed silent now realizes silence was participation. The one who acted innocent now remembers what they did behind closed doors. And suddenly the script flips, not because you manipulated the scene, but because God does not allow lies to sit on thrones forever. The apology you never asked for is heaven's way of rewriting what was written wrong. Not for your ego, but for your peace, not for your neediness, but for your confirmation. And it may not even be a perfect apology. It might be clumsy, it might be short, it might come with awkwardness, because people don't always know how to confess when they have lived in denial. But even a partial apology can still be a sign that the spiritual atmosphere has changed, because it means the lie is losing oxygen. It means the story they used to use as armor is collapsing. It means the same mouth that once minimized you is now forced to acknowledge you. And again, you must hold this correctly. The apology isn't your worth, it's proof that your worth never depended on their recognition. It's confirmation that the God who told you to keep moving was not wasting your obedience. The reversal is that you no longer need their words, but their words are coming anyway. And that's the kind of timing only God orchestrates. This is where you learn the difference between vindication and validation. Validation says now I feel valuable because you admitted it, but vindication says I was valuable the whole time, and now the truth is catching up to the story. Vindication restores order. Vindication restores clarity. Vindication reveals that what you endured wasn't imaginary, it was real, and God saw it. The reversal is also internal, because the moment you receive an apology, you're tested in a new way. Will you run back to old cycles just because someone finally said the words, or will you stay aligned with the wisdom God built in you? Because divine reversals don't always mean divine reunions. Sometimes God allows an apology as closure, not as permission. Sometimes the apology is a period at the end of a chapter, not a doorway back into it. Sometimes God lets them admit it so you can stop carrying the burden of being misunderstood, but that doesn't mean you hand them the keys to your future. And that's why this is spiritual order being restored. Because the chosen one doesn't use the apology to become arrogant. The chosen one uses it to stay peaceful. You can accept truth without reopening wounds. You can forgive without re-entering dysfunction. You can say, I appreciate that, without saying, come back into my life the way you were before. And if the apology comes with excuses, if it comes with soft blame, if it comes with, I'm sorry you felt that way, you'll still recognize the shift. Even their half-truth is evidence that their old lie is cracking because they can't fully stand on it anymore. So remain steady, remain humble. Let God handle the full exposure and the full correction. Your job is not to punish, your job is to stay aligned. Your job is to be healed enough that an apology feels like confirmation, not a rescue. And when you hold it like that, you'll realize something powerful. The apology isn't the miracle you are. The miracle is that you became someone who can receive what you once begged for and still not lose yourself, someone who can hear the words and still keep boundaries, someone who can be acknowledged and still stay obedient, someone who can be vindicated and still stay gentle. That's chosen one maturity. That's the divine reversal working in you first, then around you. And as you sit with the truth that an apology can be a divine reversal, not a human trophy, your spirit naturally starts asking the next question, not out of anxiety but out of readiness, because what kind of apology is coming often determines what kind of wisdom you need to carry when it arrives. It may come in forms that feel almost unreal at first because you got so used to silence that you trained your nervous system to stop waiting. It might be a direct message or a text after months or even years, the kind that appears on your screen like a quiet earthquake. Short at first, maybe just, hey, can we talk? And the unfamiliarity is what hits you because it's coming from someone who used to be loud in their certainty about you. Someone who used to move like they had nothing to apologize for. It could be a private call, your phone ringing with a name you didn't expect to see again, and you hesitate not because you're afraid, but because you're aware of how much you've changed. It might be a can we talk spoken in person with a tone that doesn't match the old version of them, a tone that carries weight like they're walking into a room they avoided for a long time. It might be a public correction, not always dramatic sometimes, just a sentence spoken in the right place, a small but meaningful reversal where they finally stop letting the lie sit there unchallenged. Or it could be something that surprises you even more. Someone admitting they were wrong for believing rumors. Someone who once watched you from a distance with suspicion, now coming closer with humility, saying something like, I listened to the wrong voices. And even if they don't say every detail perfectly, you'll recognize the shift, because truth has a certain sound to it. And here's what you need to know, so you don't romanticize it. It may arrive awkward, clumsy, emotional, because people who have lived in denial rarely become eloquent overnight. They may stumble, they may cry, they may talk too fast or too slow. They may send a long paragraph at midnight because that's when conviction is loudest. They may start with excuses before they reach ownership because pride doesn't die politely. But even when the delivery is messy, the core will carry truth and you'll feel it, not just in your emotions but in your discernment, because truth doesn't always sound pretty, it sounds honest. You might read one line and feel something release in your chest, not because they finally gave you worth, but because the universe is correcting a wrong record. You might hear them say, "I was wrong and the world doesn't spin," but something inside you stops bracing because you realize God can make a mouth confess what it once used to accuse. And that brings you into why it's happening now, because timing is one of God's quiet signatures, and divine timing is rarely about them finally being ready. It's often about you being healed enough. God often waits until you're healed enough that the apology won't control you, until you've built enough stability that those words won't become your new addiction, until you've stopped starving for validation so you don't treat an apology like a lifeline. If it came earlier, it would have hooked you back into old cycles, and you know exactly what those cycles felt like. One message pulls you back into explaining, one call pulls you back into craving, one tear pulls you back into rescuing one. "I miss you" pulls you back into forgetting why you had to leave in the first place. Earlier apologies can be dangerous when you're still bleeding, because you'll mistake relief for restoration. You'll mistake emotion for change. You'll mistake words for fruit. So God waited, not to punish you, but to protect you. He waited until your healing became solid enough that you could receive a confession without surrendering your boundaries, until your identity became strong enough that you could hear "I'm sorry" and not feel like you must respond with your entire heart immediately. He waited until you understood that closure is not the same as closeness, and reconciliation is not the same as relief. And now it's coming as confirmation, not a chain. It's coming as a sign that you didn't imagine the spiritual weight, that you weren't crazy for sensing what was off, that you weren't wrong for walking away. And it's also coming as a test of your new maturity, because the chosen one isn't only upgraded in suffering, the chosen one is upgraded in response. This is why it's happening now, because now you can hold it. Now you can hear it without falling into the old trance of needing them. Now you can stay present without losing yourself. Now you can treat the apology like a receipt from heaven instead of a leash from the past. And that's where discernment must step in, because apology versus access is one of the most important distinctions a chosen one ever learns, and a lot of people don't learn it until they relapse into the same pain. Not every apology equals restored closeness. Some apologies are closure, not reconciliation. Some apologies are an ending, not a reunion. Some apologies are God allowing truth to be spoken so order can be restored, not God instructing you to reopen the door and go back to what broke you. And this is where chosen ones must separate forgiveness from permission, because forgiveness is something you can offer in purity, but permission is something that must be earned in practice. You can forgive fully and still keep boundaries strong. You can release bitterness without restoring access. You can stop carrying the weight without inviting the same hands to hold your heart again. Forgiveness is spiritual cleanliness. It's you refusing to let poison live rent-free in your soul. Permission is relational trust, and trust is built with consistent fruit, not emotional speeches. So when the apology comes, don't confuse "I feel better now" with "we are safe now." Don't confuse "they admitted it" with "they have changed." An apology is a door to truth, but change is a road, and roads take time, and some people want to sprint past accountability into closeness, because closeness feels like relief. But you're not here to provide relief at the cost of your peace. You're not here to reward a confession with access if access is what harmed you. Some people apologize because they are convicted, which is good, but conviction is the beginning, not the finish line. Other people apologize because their reputation is threatened, because the story is cracking and they want to manage the damage. Other people apologize because they miss the benefits of your presence, your stability, your kindness, your energy, and they want the fruit without respecting the root. That's why discernment matters. That's why you must remember, forgiveness is free, access is not. Forgiveness is immediate, trust is earned. Forgiveness is you, and God access is you and patterns. And your boundaries are not bitterness, they are wisdom with a backbone. Because chosen ones don't just forgive, they steward their future. They don't just love, they lead their own lives. They don't just accept words, they watch for fruit. And that leads into how to respond with authority and peace, because your response is where your upgrade becomes visible. You respond without panic, without ego, without performance, because you're not fragile anymore, you're forged. Stay calm even if your heart beats faster for a moment, even if old emotions knock on the door, because calm is not coldness, calm is control, calm is proof you're no longer governed by the past. Listen for ownership. Not poetry, not dramatic guilt, not vague statements like mistakes were made, but ownership that sounds like I did this, I said that I was wrong, I hurt you, because specifics reveal sincerity. Look for clarity. Look for truth without excuses. Look for whether they try to make their apology your responsibility by saying, I hope you can forgive me, while avoiding the real weight of what they did. Notice if they respect your boundaries, because the first sign of real change is not tears, it's respect. Do they ask what you need and honor it? Do they accept a slower pace without pushing? Do they allow you to respond in your time? Or do they demand immediate comfort? And here's the part chosen ones must learn without guilt. Don't rush to comfort them if they harmed you. Some people will cry, and the old you will want to rescue, to soothe, to say, it's okay, just to end the tension, but your peace matters, and your healing is not their therapy session. You're not here to manage their guilt. You're not here to clean up their consequences. You can be compassionate without becoming responsible. You can acknowledge their words without absorbing their emotions. You can say, I hear you, without saying, let me make you feel better. Because if they truly understand what they did, they will be willing to sit in the discomfort of accountability without asking you to reduce it for them. They will not weaponize their sadness to regain control. They will not turn your pain into their stage. Authority and peace look like this. You speak slowly, you don't over-explain, you don't negotiate your boundaries, you don't promise anything in the heat of emotion. You can say thank you for saying that and leave it there. You can say I appreciate the honesty without offering closeness. You can say I forgive you and still say that doesn't mean we return to what we were. And if the apology is real and reconciliation is possible, it will withstand time. It will withstand boundaries. It will withstand the requirement of consistency. Real repentance doesn't rush you. Real repentance doesn't pressure you. Real repentance doesn't get angry when you protect yourself. It accepts the pace of trust. And if you notice the opposite, if you notice they become impatient, defensive, or entitled, then you'll know the apology may be about relieving their conscience more than honoring your healing. Your response should protect your spirit first. Pray before you answer if you need to. Step away from the phone if you feel stirred. You're allowed to take time. You're allowed to process. You're allowed to be wise. Because chosen ones don't respond from old wounds, they respond from new alignment. And when you respond with authority and peace, you don't just protect yourself, you honor what God built in you through all that quiet misunderstanding. You show heaven and you show your own soul that you're no longer pulled by the same strings, you're led by something higher, and that is the real reversal, not just that they apologize, but that you stay whole when they do. And after you learn how to respond with authority and peace, there's one more layer that completes the whole picture, because chosen ones don't build their freedom on other people's sentences, and that's why even if the apology never comes, you still win. Let that settle deep, because some of the strongest healing you will ever experience is the healing that happens without a conversation, the healing that happens without them finally admitting it, the healing that happens while the world stays messy and God still makes you whole. Your freedom doesn't depend on someone else's words. Your peace is not a hostage waiting for their text. Your restoration is not locked inside their mouth. God can give closure without conversation. God can close a chapter with one quiet internal shift where you wake up and realize you don't feel the same weight anymore, where the memory is still a memory, but it no longer has claws where your mind can revisit the past without spiraling, where you can bless them from a distance without needing them to agree with your version of the story. God can give closure through a new season that makes the old pain feel like a place you used to live, not a place you still live. He can give closure through new relationships that remind you what respect feels like, through new opportunities that prove you weren't blocked. You are redirected through a new strength in your spirit that makes you say, I don't need to be vindicated by people to be validated by God. And it matters that you hear this clearly. The apology is a bonus, not the foundation. It's a receipt, not the roof. It's confirmation, not completion. The foundation is what God already did in you while you were misunderstood, what He already built in you while the silence stayed loud, what He already repaired in you while you were learning to breathe again. You're already restored in the deepest way that matters. You're not controlled by their opinion anymore. You're not waiting on their permission to be happy. You're not pausing your future until they feel guilty enough to confess. That's victory. That's freedom. And even if you never hear the words, you still win because you chose healing, and healing is the kind of win that doesn't require anyone else to cooperate. Because chosen ones don't heal by luck, they heal by obedience, by discipline, by prayer, by boundaries, by letting God rewrite the inner script, even when the outer script stayed unfair. So if the apology never comes, you don't collapse, you don't spiral, you don't start bargaining with the past again, you keep moving. Because God's justice doesn't need your timeline to be real, and God's restoration doesn't need their participation to be complete. And that's why if the apology does come, it becomes even more meaningful, because now it's not saving you, it's simply agreeing with what God already finished in you. And when you understand that, you can also understand what this apology signals about your next season, because there is a pattern in spiritual timing that chosen ones start noticing. Once their discernment is sharpened, when your season shifts, the old season starts sending receipts. It's like the moment you step into a new room, the old room suddenly echoes, not because it has power, but because it's losing it. People come back with honesty because your life is moving forward and truth can't keep pretending. Your growth becomes a spotlight that exposes the old narrative as outdated. Your peace becomes a mirror that makes people face what they did to someone who refused to break. And you'll notice how strange it feels. The apology shows up right when you're no longer chasing it, right when you're focused on your future, right when you're aligned, right when you're finally building without looking over your shoulder. That timing is not random. Often it's a sign that favor, new doors and new alignment are close, because when God prepares to elevate you, He also cleans up the record. Not always publicly, not always dramatically, but spiritually, because elevation requires clarity. If God is moving you into influence, into leadership, into purpose-driven impact, He often allows the truth to surface so you can walk forward without the old fog of false labels hanging over your name. The apology can be a sign that certain lies are losing oxygen, that certain distortions are being corrected, that the atmosphere around you is shifting from confusion to clarity. And it doesn't mean everyone will apologize. Some people will disappear instead. Some people will pretend nothing happened. Some people will double down. But you may see a pattern as your life rises. The people who are part of the old confusion either soften into honesty or fade out of relevance, because your next season has a different frequency, and not everyone can breathe there. New doors begin to open, not just externally but internally, doors of confidence that doesn't need to brag, doors of focus that doesn't need to prove, doors of discernment that doesn't need to accuse, because you can see clearly now. New alignment begins to form. You attract people who value integrity. You connect with those who don't need you to shrink. You find yourself in rooms where you don't have to explain your heart like it's a foreign language. And the apology, when it comes, is often a sign that you're leaving the old season behind for good. It's like the past sending a final invoice, trying to settle accounts before you fully step into the next chapter. Not because the past can stop you, but because the spiritual world does not like unresolved truth sitting in the shadows when God is bringing someone into a brighter assignment. So yes, the apology can signal elevation. It can signal that God is rearranging relationships, exposing motives, restoring order, and positioning you for something that requires a clean conscience and a clear mind. It can signal that the favor you've been praying for isn't just about blessings, it's about alignment doors opening without manipulation opportunities that don't cost your peace, and a new level of stability where you don't have to fight for basic respect. And as that elevation approaches, Section 10 becomes a necessary pause, because before you celebrate any apology, the chosen one's heart check must happen. You have to ask yourself quietly and honestly, am I ready to receive an apology without pride, without reopening wounds, and without returning to old patterns? Because this is where many people stumble, not in the storm, but in the calm that follows it. Some people receive an apology and suddenly pride creeps in like a subtle perfume. See, I told you, and the heart starts craving the feeling of being right more than the peace of being free. Others receive an apology and the old wound opens like it never healed, because they never truly processed, they only distracted. Others receive an apology and rush back into closeness, because the words feel like a warm blanket, and they forget that patterns don't change just because a sentence was spoken. So this is your heart check. Can you receive truth without becoming arrogant? Can you accept confession without turning it into a trophy? Can you forgive without losing boundaries? Can you listen without letting your nervous system hand over the steering wheel? Can you hold compassion without becoming responsible for their guilt? And can you keep your future protected even when your past tries to reintroduce itself with a softer voice? The chosen one's heart check is not about becoming suspicious of everyone, it's about becoming wise with yourself. It's about making sure your healing is deep enough that you don't need to punish, and your boundaries are strong enough that you don't relapse. It's about praying for wisdom, not revenge. Because the goal is peace, not payoff. The goal is not to win the apology and then replay it in your mind like a victory lap. The goal is to be so grounded that whatever comes, your spirit remains steady. So pray like this in your own words: God, keep my heart clean. Keep me humble. Let me respond with discernment. Let me not reopen what you already healed. Let me not return to what you already delivered me from. Let me know when an apology is closure and when it's the beginning of consistent change. Let me separate forgiveness from permission. Let me value peace over pride. Let me value alignment over nostalgia. Let me be kind without being careless. Let me be loving without being loose with access. That prayer is authority. That prayer is maturity. That prayer is how chosen ones stay elevated without becoming bitter or naive. And now the conclusion can land with the strength it deserves, because this whole message is not about you chasing them, it's about you choosing healing. You didn't chase them, you chose healing. You didn't beg for the apology, you built your life anyway. You didn't fight every rumor you grew until the rumor couldn't fit the reality anymore. You didn't demand closure from people who avoided accountability. You let God close the chapter in your spirit first. And now God is bringing truth to your doorstep, not as a chain, but as confirmation. Not to control you, but to cleanse the record, not to pull you back, but to show you how far you've come. So stay grounded. Respond with discernment. Protect your peace like it's priceless, because it is. Don't rush. Don't over-explain. Don't hand out access just because someone finally says the words. Let ownership be clear. Let change be consistent. Let boundaries be respected. Let your healing remain the priority. And if you've been waiting on justice, waiting on truth, waiting on God to handle what you couldn't handle, let this be your declaration today. Comment, I receive peace or closure, then subscribe and share this with the chosen one who's been waiting on justice, because the same God who healed you in silence is fully able to bring truth into the light without you losing your peace.